Well, Becca, today's guest has been a consultant on Atypical, so that made me think about autistic characters in TV and the movies, and I
Mhm.
started to was curious, who are some of the autistic characters that you really like or you really identify with?
Um, I don't identify with actually any of the characters that are actually labeled autistic on their shows. The one that identify most with is actually Bones from the TV show Bones. She was definitely a hidden autistic, and they just never talked about it. If they would go back and label her autistic, she would be my favorite portrayal. I think, honestly, even though they never said autistic, it was the most honest portrayal of an adult, with those struggles. And so I loved that show for that reason. Other than that, I struggle, man. It's hard, right? I mean, we're in many ways, actually, we're growing in that area, right? Where we're seeing it in the media, we're talking about it in the media, we're seeing these characters now coming in, and now we're at the next kind of crux of the whole, social dilemma of it all, right? Do we now hire autistic people to pay autistics? Why aren't we? Right. And so we're now at that next place, which to me as an academic, and when I step outside of it, I look at it and I go, well, good, we're moving forward. Right. I'm like, yay, we used to not be there at all. And now at least we're talking about it. Right. And so to me, that's forward motion. Right. But I think a lot of people in our community kind of have been waiting so long for good representation that they want it perfect right away. Like they want it the way it's supposed to be right now. But neurotypicals don't work that way. They are very slow in the way, like they know a right thing, but they like to take off the Band-Aid slowly, whereas autistics just kind of rip it off and deal with the bleeding afterwards, right? Like that's kind of the different way we approach stuff. And so I think as autistic people, we need to be a little patient and let everybody catch up, but I'm glad to see it more. Of course, we have to talk about Sia then if we're going to talk about this right now, right? Because the movie's coming out, and that's been a big deal. If I was still doing neurodiversity newsstand, I'd probably have to talk about it all the time, right? Because everyone's really mad. And I think they have a point, right? But then I also think where there's not been someone out there with sort of the rational response of, yeah, they could definitely have done better, but hey, we're out there, right? Which is a growth. We weren't out there, right? At least now we have a choice. Oh my God, a while ago, you couldn't have asked me that question. Which of these characters, right?
Right.
I didn't have a choice. It was Rain Man or nothing, right?
Yes.
Truth. And Rain Man wasn't even autistic, and we get to go into all that, right? And so it's really a place where I think we're now ready for growth as a community. That's what I see it as. Where
Totally.
now we want to see ourselves. We now have the pride behind being autistic and the claiming of the word and that stuff. And now we want to see ourselves, right? We want to see ourselves represented. And that's a growth, huge growth for our community. And we have to remember that, I think. But yeah, that's my long-winded soapbox answer to who's my favorite autistic character. Do you have a favorite one? Do you have one that you enjoy?
Well, I mean, one that I really liked maybe in the last year or so, because one of the reasons was it was an actually autistic actress, was Kayla Cromer playing Matilda on, I thought, which was a great show, Everything's Going to Be Okay. So I think for me, that was one of the ones that jump out. I'd like to see actually autistic people playing more
Right?
of these characters. But like you said, there's progress being made, but I still think we have a long way to go.
We do, but I also think it's so funny that we struggle with this so much, because I know a gazillion autistic actors that play neurotypical all the time. Like,
Right.
like that's most characters are neurotypical, right? So if you're an autistic person and you're an actor, you're playing neurotypical all the time.
Right.
So why, right? Like, why is that so? I don't know. We have some work to do as humans, right? We have to think about it a little bit more, because there are things like that where you go, that's hypocrisy. Hold on, right? And so there's a difference in there. It's a different conversation then. But yes, I think we can do better, and I think the more comfortable autistics get being open about their autism in the workspace, the more we will see that, right? Because when people write about what's really around them, if there are open autistic people around them, they will have to write about us, right? And so we will be part of their life. And so that's we got to go there. We have to let that happen, right? And so some of the onus is on us to be open and proud and all of those things, right? Wherever we are, and to create spaces where you can disclose, right? I don't know. There's a lot in it, I guess. Do you have a favorite character, Dave? Do you have one? Do you have to say the character from Atypical? If you do, I forgive you.
Well, I would have to say it's Sam Gardner from Atypical, but no. I love hearing you two discuss this because it's a very rational, level-headed conversation. I think it's very easy to vilify what is being kind of shoved down our throats. Like you go on Netflix and you pull down a show, it's like, oh, it's an autistic protagonist. Here we go again. And you see some Wikipedia definition of what somebody's cousin who they thought was autistic acts like, right? And so, but what if we dial those knobs up and make it ultra quirky and they can see through walls?
They have to really know that we're autistic, right? It has to be really obvious, right?
Yeah, it's like beat them over the head. Like, do you get it? Like how cool I am because I'm autistic, or how like, ooh, that's quirky. But the reality is that yes, we now that people are seeing the value from a creative space, people are seeing the value in sort of a neurodivergent mind. And capturing that very beautifully and with hopefully humanity and respect. Any television show featuring any character who's got any kind of like substance to him or her, you really have to ground that character in humanity, whether they're autistic or not. But if it's an autistic character, you don't want to appropriate anything without really doing it justice. That being said, so I get like, nothing about us without us, and that I support that, of course. At the same time, there are a couple different realities in Los Angeles and Hollywood. One is that sometimes the autistic actor that they want to cast isn't playing the character as well as a neurotypical actor with maybe more experience could play an autistic character, which is not to say that that's every case. But I think what casting directors are up against is like, we want this to be authentic. We want it to be legitimate, but it's a lot more watchable and relatable with this other person playing this character.
Right.
So there's that piece of it, which sometimes could be tricky. But I think the harder reality, especially in Los Angeles, is to get any show made is such a long shot.
Yeah.
And then what they do is they say, all right, the studio or the network says we're gonna shoot a pilot on this, so develop the concept and staff a writer's room. So now I have to staff a writer's room, and the writers have to get the autism correct.
Right.
And every showrunner has the writers that they want to work with because they know how to write a story, and not all those writers are going to be autistic. Now, I say that, but we all know on the phone call here that most of them are. They just aren't like pinning
Which
it to
is
their
where the
chest.
openness comes in, right?
What people don't realize is probably autistics are writing these shows and filming these shows. But to get a show on the air is the odds are so far against you. You should assume it'll never happen. Then to staff a writer's room, you have to get the best writers. Those writers, let's whittle that number down even more. Those writers have to be union. They have to be available and not on some other show. So now if you're a showrunner, you've got like 12 writers that you can pick from. And if you put one more kind of like parameter on there that's restrictive, your pool shrinks. So I think it's really about having diverse sets, diverse writers' rooms, diverse production companies. We're looking at right now, actually, we're looking at an adaptation of Journal of Best Practices into a television show. And we've gone through this cycle a couple times. So at this point, I'm just like, okay, cool. Call me if it happens. But the team that I'm working with, it was very important to them to have me be on the team, like very much contributing. Whereas with HBO, when they wanted to do my book a couple of years ago, they were like, we'll take care of it. And
right. But
well,
I mean, how much of that, like, that's the piece I think as an autistic community, we're not thinking about in our conversation, right? That, you know, media is a business. It's a business. These people have to make money off of this show, and the people with the money have to like the show enough to give them more money to me, right? And so we're talking about a lot of people pleasing in this process, right? And so what I want autistics to remember is that when we actually get through and get a character on television, don't forget to celebrate that we're being represented, period, right? And like, that's the piece that I think in our conversations, our really visceral conversations online, that's missing, right? It's that there's another half to this story. Like, there's another group of people who are involved in making this thing besides us, right? And so really, even if you're an autistic writer and you're in the writer's room, and even if your people in there know you're autistic, you're still writing for the majority, which is neurotypical, right? You still have to people please the majority of humans to get the watchers, right? And so it has to read, right? And we don't talk about that piece. We don't talk about what it takes artistically, even creatively, to make that happen, right? I mean, I can't imagine. I'm going to ask you instead. I love that we didn't even introduce him and we're just talking. It's David Finch, by the way, everybody out there. It's David Finch.
We'll figure it out.
When I think about it, I think like, well, if we want to be included, we have to go so basic. We have to go back so much to think about how we get involved, right? We have to get involved at that writing level. We have to get involved at the production level, right? We have to be there and in people's lives on a regular basis for us to be part of the story, right? If you want to be part of it, you have to be involved, right?
I think that's really brilliantly insightful. And I think, yeah, we need to celebrate when it happens. And I think that like any worthy social progress movement, where, you know, for instance, I worked in the corporate world for the last 20 something years, and I've recently gotten out of it because it's so disgusting and it won't change. It just, in my lifetime, it's still going to be the shittiest people on earth running things and treating people like garbage and getting very rich doing it. So I can't really endorse that anymore. Plus I keep getting fired.
We don't fit there. They don't like us. We go, but why? And they go, get out.
That's just it. Yeah, you stand up and you're like, this is not a good way to do things. And they say, here's your box, you know, conform or leave. So, but what I've noticed is that, you know, I was a manager for a little period of time, and I was very fortunate that I had mostly women on my team of 25 creative people. But the team, and I inherited this team, like it was given to me to run. I didn't really get to, I only made one hire, but all of those women were reporting to a layer of managers below me who were men. And so just like we have to celebrate that women are in the workplace, and we have to acknowledge that it's still not enough. Right. So what we do is we kind of form beachheads, or we kind of get our feet like planted where we can. And then we carry people into it. So in the case of, you know, there's a director in Hollywood, director, filmmaker, executive producer guy, and his name is Scott Steindorf. And he wrote a very public, like, admission, like he had a coming out moment recently. And then he wrote a big article about it in Entertainment Weekly, or I don't know, some Hollywood trade rag or something. But now he's doing the heavy lifting of like, I want to go and make a feature film, and I want to, you know, get a lot of exposure on this. And he's been speaking to a lot of apparently academics, and I'm hearing all this third hand. I've never talked to him, but that was a situation where he thought the right approach was, hey, my autism revelation is new to me, and I'm going to go to the subject matter experts. So he turned to academia. Right. And I think there are a lot of people out there like Steve Silberman and Barry Prezant who are saying, super exciting, you go for it, like whatever inspires you, take that inspired action. But also remember, you'll probably want to get some not so shiny public figures, like real autistic people, and just hang out with them.
Right, like know your people, right? Because I
Right.
think, but that is, I think, the autistic response to figuring out that you're on the spectrum, right? We're information seekers. The minute we get that information, we're like, know everything, please, thank you, right? And so that's his response as someone getting a diagnosis, right? That's how he wants to glean his information, is through these people, right? But
Yeah.
I think at some point in his journey, he'll realize, wait, I'm not alone. There are others like me, and bets are there'll be another film, right? That's all of his community, right?
But
Because
that's
that's the
interesting.
journey. That's
Yeah.
the way we go. And so it'll be interesting. We'll watch him on his journey as he films his own journey through his
Yeah,
diagnosis, right?
totally. It's just like, being gay not only used to be a criminal offense, but it also used to be a pathology in the DSM. Like you could be categorized as something just because of your sexuality. And I think what we've learned just in our lifetimes of watching go from awareness, acceptance to reform, and then even to the extent that the Trump states will allow us to build policy that even supports and protects people. So in that period of time, we've done this, but you don't hear a lot of in the gay community people saying you're being gay wrong. It's
Right.
celebrate who you are, to the extent that they have parades. And like we in the autism community, I think we run the risk sometimes of telling each other that we're taking the autism journey the wrong way.
Right. Yep.
And it's sort of like it's such it's as personal to somebody as prayer, whether you've announced it in the LA Times, or if you just got your diagnosis quietly and it's just for you to know. And so Becca, I was trying to silence my puppy when you were saying you were about to ask me a question,
Oh.
and I think I did not answer it if you asked me.
I remember the question I was going to ask you, because I was waiting for it to come back up again. Because this thing, I have to know, like, as human to human, right? Like, as Becca to Dave, what was it like to sit there and give neurotypicals advice about being autistic? And did they take, like, was it honored? Were you validated in saying these things? Or, like, were they like, that's cute, Dave, thanks so much? Like, you know?
You mean in Atypical specifically?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's your experience was on Atypical, but I'm sure
Yeah.
you've had other experiences too. But I mean, in the media box, right? How
Mhm.
was it taken, right? How
Oh.
was it, right?
I love this question because I want to give due credit. So when they reached out to me, it was actually Sony Pictures Television is like the cash giant behind this, and then Netflix, of course, distributes it. So Sony reached out and said the showrunner Rabia Rashid would she had essentially, unbeknownst to me until after the show debuted, she had sort of learned a lot about how she wanted to architect her autistic protagonist, Sam Gardner, who was at the time in high school, like a junior in high school or something, when the show debuted. And so she had read my book, loved it, gave the book to Keir Gilchrist, who played me, or who played Sam Gardner, and she said, familiarize yourself with kind of the some of the behavioral things that are happening in Dave's book and blah, blah, blah. But you're not Dave Finch, but just to give you a glimpse into
Right.
what it's like to be an autistic person in a decidedly, at this point, either not autistic or highly closeted autistic world.
Right.
And so there was a little bit of influence from the Journal of Best Practices on the show, which is why they reached out and said, for seasons 2, 3, and however many after that, would you sign on to consult? Because they had gotten some things. In the first season of Atypical, there was some inconsistency in Sam Gardner. So he was autistic in this way, and then also autistic in these other ways, which is great.
Mhm.
And it's even weird for me to say autistic like it's an adjective, but whatever.
Right.
So his autism was manifesting in we'll say variants A, B, and C in a few episodes. A couple episodes later, a completely different thing would come up that sort of violated the character's point of view. Never minding getting autism wrong or anything like that. It was just a point of view violation on the character's part. So the autism community I got very vocal, and they said, the producers at Atypical said, we really, really take this very seriously. We want to get this right because we're not here to like riff on autism or make a buck on the back of autistic characters. We really want to portray this accurately. Would you come on and advise how we can handle the Sam character moving forward? So I said, sure. But to answer your question, the very first thing I said was, it sounds wonderful, but I don't want to be a token name. I don't want a credit on the show just so they can check the box and say like, well, we've got an autistic, whatever. So, and that was the first thing I said. The second thing I said was, I can spot you in terms of what you've already built for Sam Gardner, and I can keep him consistent and keep him like in his lane sort of. But, I'm not interested in trying to invent a character that is all autistic people in one person. So I said, so my big advice, like right out of the gate to them was, pick a lane for Sam. Don't represent the whole spectrum. Just give him a very nuanced, like go deep on what he has. Don't go broad across autism.
Right. Yeah.
So they said, well, first of all, they're like, you'll just have to trust us. Like Robbie or Rashid really, really wants this to be authentic. So you're definitely not a token. Well, you'll have meaningful input. And it's funny you mentioned that because I happen to have the 4th season script right now. And I'm marking them up and stuff. But it's interesting because every note that I have ever made on any script since the beginning of season 2 has made its way into the final version of the script. And then they send me the network cuts before, it's like a rough cut of the episode before they polish it and make it look all nice. And after they've shot it, because I'm not on set for these, I live in Denver. So, they're not like, I'm not so important that I need to be in Los Angeles. It's just like, send us your notes and don't come see us.
Right.
But no, they would be more than happy to invite me out. It's just Sony doesn't spend a lot of money on things that aren't executives. So,
True. Let's be real.
I'm trying to guarantee that I will never, ever work again. But no, so Sony doesn't want me out there on the set, and I don't blame them because I wouldn't want some random person walking around a set. It's a pretty big deal. So point is, when they send me the network cuts, Rabia and her team of writers have taken all of my notes, incorporated them into the final episode, and I have not made one edit that hasn't been into the final episode. And but I also go through and I mark what they're doing really well, because you don't want to do creativity by saying no. I want them to understand how they're getting it right, because you've got a writer's room of, I don't know, 6 or 8 people or 10, however many. They'll all go off and do other things a couple of years from now. And I want them all to have a good appreciation for that's how we nailed the autism character. And kind of coaching the writers into yes, that's a realistic portrayal. There have been a couple times where I had to have a real difficult discussion too. It's like an entire scene was just fundamentally flawed. It was written off base, and I knew that when they went to go shoot it, for instance, this didn't happen, but for the example, I'll say let's say a starting pistol would go off right next to Sam Gardner, just as he was focusing on something. It would not just startle him, but it would cause sort of a catastrophic chain of behavioral events that just wasn't captured. So for instance, the fictitious starter pistol goes off and Sam just is oblivious to it. It's like, ooh, you have to, and that's at the beginning of the scene, right? And so from there, there have been a couple times where I've had to just email Robbie and be almost apologetic and say I'm not trying to slow down or fuck up your writing, but this is a central thing that's getting it wrong. And she's always been so appreciative and grateful, and thank you so much. And she'll personally rewrite it herself and get it right every time. So my experience with Atypical has probably ruined me for most Hollywood things, because it's been so real and human centric and not gross Hollywood stuff. So,
Awesome.
yeah. And
See, but this is important, right? Because I think back, right,
Yeah.
even a few, like, what, 5-6 years ago, there wouldn't have been the need and desire for people to reach out for a consultant. They would have felt fully informed to write an autistic character without a consultant, right? So
Yes.
even those little steps are, to me, are growth. They're movement forward, right? It's like, you know, are they going to get Sam right for everybody? No, you're not. He's a TV character. He's not a person, right?
right.
And so, like, you're not. But can you get close? Can you do your best? And then when you know better, do better? Sure can. And I feel like that's where we're at, and we need to give Hollywood a break on that, right? Because they really are kind of in their very, very slow neurotypical way stepping forward, right? But that's the way things have to go, right?
You're exactly
so
right.
we're included in the movement forward, which is something we weren't included in before, right? And
Right.
so
Exactly. It's sort of like at IMFAR, this national medical, healthcare, whatever conference, and they would never have any autistic speakers. In fact, it was just like, we don't need your opinion, thanks. We're the medical community. It's like, what do you mean you don't need my opinion?
right. About
know?
me?
Right. Like my daughter just, she's 14 and 15, and she just gave a detailed report to her science class about Giardia. And like, she was focusing on the people who have it. Like, and all of her research was done. This is so gross, but all of her research was done of people like pulling grubs out of their skin. It's the same thing. It's like, why she could read a textbook about Giardia, or she could just watch a lot of footage of people who are exactly.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get there, like that's the whole thing. But we can also be part of our own demise and part of our own slowdown, I think, when we are difficult to work with, for example, right? And we get very black and white in our thinking, and we forget to be a little flexible for the neurotypicals in the room, and right? And so we can get very, very kind of rigid about those things. And I think that can impede our growth as well as a community. And that's on us, right? That's on really just being honest that we have black and white minds, and that sometimes it's not a black and white situation, right? And so I don't know, there's both parties that kind of, I feel like, need to kind of come together on the topic, and I think we're getting there, but it's just never going to be fast enough for the autism community, no matter what we do. It'll never be right the first time, and it'll never be fast enough, right?
Yeah, I think you're right. And but you're right, like you're trying, and you do the best you can, and we need the vocal people to be saying like, still not enough, go,
Right.
But you're right. I think productivity comes from compromise, whether you're a red state, blue state, autistic, not autistic. Like, representation, of course, matters, but you have to also set realistic expectations for progress. So I totally agree with everything you're saying. 100%.
Dave, how were you initially approached to be a consultant on Atypical?
So that's an interesting. So as I mentioned, the Journal of Best Practices was used to sort of inform the character of Sam Gardner, but then also kind of the family around him too, where they're like, let's face it, the humor to me personally is when neurotypicals, the shit they have to deal with from me, and the stuff that I have to deal with of theirs that they don't even realize is bizarre and messed up because it's their team, right? So they had used some of the stuff in my book to inform that character, and then I wasn't gonna really watch the show because I don't know, I'm not so interested. Like, when I hear there's an autistic character on a show, I'm just like, okay, is it a good show? Like, will I laugh if I watch it? If I'm not going to laugh, I'm not going to watch it just because there's an autistic character. So I had no plans on watching it because at that time, my wife and I had gotten way into Parks and Rec reruns. So, so I was like obsessed with the show Parks and Rec. It's like, I don't have room for another show. I have to watch this, like binge watch Parks and Rec over and over. Well, anyway, a friend of mine texted me. There's a scene in the first season where Michael Rappaport's character, Doug, who's Sam's dad, is handing a copy of my real book in real life, like the real one, handing it to Sam's shrink, saying, hey, thanks for lending me this book. It was really helpful in understanding Sam, right? But it's just like this very quick, it's not like a close zoom in and product placement. It was just like this quick flash, but a very astute friend of mine was like, what? And he screen captured it and sent it to me. And he said, hey, your book is in this show Atypical. And when I looked at the picture, I was like, God damn, that is my book. So I looked up Atypical and best practices or whatever. And I started reading these articles where they were like, oh yeah, we read a lot of books on autism. And one of the ones that was pretty helpful was this book by this guy, Dave Finch, and like whatever.
Oh, wow. You're like, I was watching Parks and Rec. Sorry.
Totally. I was like, I would have helped you more, but damn, this, Amy Poehler is really funny.
Funny. Really funny.
April Ludgate is my favorite human on earth, let's face it. So so I reached out. I contacted my agent and was like, is there any way you could connect me somehow to somebody who's involved with Atypical? Just because I want to write to them and say, oh, that's cool. My book was shown in there, and what fun, like just to make a connection. I don't know. It's like my wife is really fascinated by car accidents. Like she'll want to wander onto the scene of the crash and like pick around and see what it's doing. I get that way when I'm interested in something that I can't explain. So this was one where I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with introducing myself to this television show. Like they didn't call me. They don't want me to be. So I don't know why I'm reaching out. I just want to. So they said, yeah, well, here's Rabia. She created the show. She's the showrunner. She's the head writer. And so I just said, I was like, hey, I'm going to be in town, in a couple of weeks. You want to get breakfast or dinner or something? And she's like, let's meet. And we had a really wonderful breakfast together. Actually, it was like we met for pancakes or something. And we were there for about 2.5 hours. And so I was aware that there was negative press and some pretty vocal people speaking out against this, some of the inconsistencies in the character.
Right.
But I wasn't sure if all of those things were entirely fair. Like I think some people were rightfully offended, but then maybe took it a little far and demonized the show. And so we sat down for pancakes. But on the day before I was in Los Angeles and the night before we had breakfast, I was just like binging the whole first season.
Right.
And I was taking notes like crazy and just like, okay, this is what they're doing well. Yeah, I could see where you stepped in it there. Like that's going to piss off everybody in autism land, right?
Right.
And for instance, there's a couple weird things like Sam broke into his shrink's house because there was a romantic interest there. And what they couldn't have possibly realized, is that autistic people are slightly more at risk of abuse or like sexual abuse or inappropriate conduct from the therapists that are there to kind of work with them. They wouldn't have possibly known that. So I think when that moment happened and he's like trying to do something really nice and romantic, completely misguided, right. For his therapist that he's got a crush on. That offended some people. So I just wrote down what I had observed, and I showed her the notebook, and she was elated. I mean, she just like lit up she's like, you took all these notes. And so she went and sat through while I ate, and she was just like reading them very carefully. And I was like, I can scan those. Right. She wanted to like absorb the information. And she said, thank you so much. Like it was just really direct feedback, very honest. Like I wasn't trying to sugarcoat anything because why? Like as far as I knew, I was flying back to Denver and never talked to them again.
Right.
So all I told her was at breakfast, I was like, well, moving forward in the next couple seasons, if you want, if you want any like just feedback, or if I can be a resource for you, just assume I'm in your back pocket. I'll be glad to help, because I think you're doing really important work. And I think there's just a couple things that we can shore up that would really make this character very consistent, right? And so then Sony, I didn't hear anything for like 3 months, and I had basically forgotten about it because I was still watching Parks and Rec. And so then I got an email from Sony saying, hey, you know, Rabia would really like to invite you to be on the next couple of seasons. So I think the general answer is I just inserted myself into the equation.
And I have to, right? I mean, that's the lesson, right? If you want to be part of the story, you have to step into the story, right? So, right. And that's what you have to do. And I think that's the space where autistics struggle, right? It's that first step of like the scary thing, and like to do the scary thing, like to send the email and like, should I hit send? Should I hit send? Like that, you know? And I think we struggle, right? We're like, read it 5 times. Did I say anything I shouldn't have said, right? And it's all like that for us. And I think we struggle with making that step. But as you guys can see, if you take the step, you end up being a consultant on Atypical, right? And it's because you have to step up to the plate. You have to be there and be available, right?
Yeah.
And we do as a community complain into our void a lot, right? We kind of, right?
Yeah.
We don't go to the powers that be that control the thing we're upset about and try to come up with a solution. We stay in our little autism community bubble and complain at each other about it, which doesn't solve anything. It doesn't help us keep movement, right? And so I think it's important that we do remember we're part of us moving forward. We have to step into it, step forward into it, right? We have to be open and willing to say, yeah, you guys screwed up, but I can help you, right?
That's an incredibly astute observation. You're so right. You just, the other thing too is I think a lot of us are maybe factory wired to behave in this way, and we've just been conditioned, like socially, you don't just go and say what you want. You know, you kind of hem and haw, and then if you don't get it, then you complain to your friends, like you said, like you complain at each other, and it stays really insular. But if you like if I go see a comedian and I love the comedian, I'll hang around
and tell them, right? Me too. Like that too. Like that was really funny. Like nothing makes me laugh. That was really funny, right?
Exactly. And it's inserting yourself. I got to interview a Broadway actor 2 years ago for a technology podcast. And really, I mean, that should be the red flag right there. It's a technology podcast. So I was just fanboying.
Right.
But she did a really great job. In the musical that I was watching, I was like, dang. So I just Googled her. It took me 3 seconds to find her manager's information. And I emailed her manager. I was like, I'm a shit splat nobody, but I would like to interview this person on this technology podcast because I think, you know, it's the theme of that particular episode is going to be just letting women be women in the workplace and not have to hear from them in the context of you are a woman. Like, I think there's a lot of gross things where it's like, oh my gosh, you know, the new CEO of whatever corporation, and she's a woman. So let's hear her take on what it's like to be a woman CEO. It's like, how about her take on what it's like to be a CEO?
Right, period.
Yeah, we don't need an asterisk. That's not helping. But anyway, so I had reached out to this actor's manager, and I was like, you know, this woman it blew me away, and I'd like to have her on. So next thing I know, like within just like 72 hours, they had set up a one-on-one interview with me and this actor. They had given me tickets to like backstage tickets to go see the show again with my daughter for free.
Wow.
And it's like you just insert yourself where you want to be, and it's funny what just drops into your lap.
It's an old, like, and I say it to my clients all the time, because the answer is no if you don't ask. And that fascinates me, right? Yeah. Like if you don't open your mouth to say, I need this, I want to try this, I'd like to meet you, whatever it is, the answer is no already. You start with a no, right? Yeah. And the only way to get a yes is to open your mouth. And once like that clicked for me, I was like, oh, right? I don't want to live my life full of no. I want to like have a whole bunch of yes. So I'm going to start asking for what I want. And I think because as autistics, our needs can be so different. We are ashamed, embarrassed, related, other things to say what it is that we need and we want, because it's not normal, the things that we need and we want, right? And so we have to break that habit. We got to stand up and like step in and be the humans that we can be, you know, in our fullness.
And this is so central to your coaching work, that you made a really good point. You and I, we were talking on a different podcast we should actually make a little drinking game around how many times the word podcast is used in this podcast.
Right.
But, I would do that if I enjoy drinking games, but I hate them.
Yeah.
So, but the word podcast, we were interviewing you, Becca, on a different one, and you made these really great points about the world. It seems to us that the world isn't ready to hear our asks because we have fun wrong. We need the wrong, you know, we cuddle wrong. All this stuff. But it's only because people aren't ready for it because they haven't heard it, because we've conditioned ourselves to not advocate for ourselves. But your work, what's central in the work you do with people is giving them the voice, the tools, and the language to be able to insert themselves. That's
what we're missing. That's why we're missing quality of life. That's why we're missing pieces, components, supports in adulthood, because we're not inserting ourselves and saying, okay, well, if you're not going to do it, then I'm going to do it, right? Because it's needed. So if you don't want, you know, and here's a pet peeve. I hate people that complain without a solution. Right? You get to complain if you are working on the solution for the thing. If you are not working on the solution for the thing, please hold your complaints, right? Because if you're not involved in fixing it, you're just taking up air to me. You're just oxygen using. And that's, to me, not useful, right? And that's where we need to be. In order to become useful, we have to step in. We have to step up. We have to be loud, right? We have to be willing to be not liked sometimes, right?
It's another tricky thing, because
for us especially, right?
Yeah.
All we want to do is people please. Please, I just want everyone to like me. I just want to be good enough for people to like me, for me to belong and included. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to say, I want to be included. I'm here. Like,
that's right.
And then they can't send you away. So that's right. I guess that's the takeaway. Take away that lesson from Dave. Step in, right? Insert yourself where you want to be. You already have a no, and the worst answer you can get is no. So you're not going to lose anything, right? So yeah, take Dave's lesson. Go step in, insert yourself.
Step in, and the big takeaway from your wisdom is, I love that. If you know, the answer is no if you don't ask.
Mm-hmm.
Brilliant.
It really is.
That's So I don't know. I think we've already unlocked that mystery. So now.
I hope you guys now are happy that we've solved your problems entirety in this podcast. We will now move along. We should move along because we have the fun part now. This is like the super fun. This is Doug's super fun inside the Actors Studio questions. And they make me laugh every time. They really do. And I'm really excited for your answers.
So I'm not allowed to overthink these. Is that the rule?
Yes, that is the goal. The hope is that we don't overthink it and that it's just it's your quick response to it.
You always take us in different directions that we never anticipated. So the first of the 11 questions are, what are your pronouns?
Truly anything. Don't care. I'm used to him, his, but you know, I've been called worse things. So whatever makes you, the other person, feel comfortable. Because I'm like a blank. So I don't care.
Yeah. And what's your preferred stim?
Well, I think one thing that has been revealed to me on Zoom is this. It's pulling the hair on my face. And I didn't think that was a thing until this COVID, and then I didn't need to shave anymore. So this got like longer. Mm-hmm. Now that I do this a lot. So right now, I would have to say it's pulling my hair on my face.
That's good.
Every time I try to grow it, it gets too itchy and I have to shave. So I'm impressed that you can grow it. So
It's interesting. Men do that a lot. They like this a lot. This whole the hand here thing.
Yeah, and I don't know what
It
it's like. It's like I'm trying
It's
to.
something to hold on to while you're hanging out there.
It's a way to suck my thumb without putting my finger in my mouth.
There you go.
No, I do that, but you know what? Another one I do that really annoys everybody around me, especially my dog, is I bounce my knees. And I never thought of that as a stim until I started talking more with Barry, and he's like, "Yeah, your nervous system is regulating itself either up or down in energy, but that's why you're bouncing your legs." And I was like, "Oh, okay." I just had no idea. But my dog rests his head on my leg when I'm eating. And so that's when I bounce my legs the most, is when I'm eating. So his head's going like, you'd think he'd get brain boggled, but he doesn't seem to mind.
what's your favorite curse word?
Fuck.
Same. Love it.
Simple.
Yes. Yeah.
Who do you love and what are you doing about it?
Ooh. All right. So I'm not allowed to overthink. Who I love is definitely my wife, Kristen, and our 2 kids. And then, I mean, there's more people than that, but that's who immediately like comes into my mind. What I'm doing about it is everything I can to not be a loser who like.
Let me not disappoint them.
That's exactly it. I could be doing more productive, healthy things, but really I'm just trying to stave off loserhood.
You may be neurotypical if.
This is really good. I love these questions.
They're really good. They're so fun.
These are amazing. Maybe neurotypical if you get offended when somebody leaves your party because your party was shitty.
Don't throw a shitty party. I got it. You may be autistic if.
If people leave your party because it was shitty. I think that might be neurodiversity in a nutshell.
Yes, exactly.
Crappy
That
parties.
might be it. Maybe that should be a book. That should definitely
Happy
be a title
parties
book.
nobody wants to be at.
Yes.
How to throw a shitty party.
Yes.
Yeah.
What's something you want to learn or to do or to be better at?
Yeah. I want to be better at getting paid for things. So I started a business last year and it's going well, but I have this bizarre thing where I just agree to do stuff for free. Like somebody will say, "Hey, we want to make 3 videos about, well, who knows, like what it's like to walk into the fabrication facility where they make semiconductors." They want to make some ridiculous video series. And I'm like, "Yeah, we'll just get started on it and we'll figure out paying me later." And my wife keeps saying, like, if you want to do
I was going to say, Kristen does not let you get away with that.
She's appalled by how much stuff I have done for clients where I'm just like, well, I figured if I did it for free, it would open up other opportunities. Really, all that does is it sets a precedent that, like, walk on me, please. Don't give me what I'm worth for this project. And I do want to get better at that. And I think I say that because I've observed, just getting involved in more and more podcast development with people, I've observed that it's always the autistic folks who are most likely to say, yeah, just, hey, if you'll feature my art or something on this podcast, you can just have it. It's like, whoa, no,
Right.
I won't feature this until we can pay you to feature it. So that's maybe bigger than just me, but that's my thing I want to do better at, is being a good businessman. I should take lessons from that Michael Douglas. He always plays really fierce business characters on movies. So
Maybe if I just, mask up like Michael Douglas, all of a sudden it'll all make sense.
totally.
Send out your invoices signed by Michael Douglas and
Your
hope they
invoice.
come back.
Get on QuickBooks with my Michael Douglas. Something tells me no Michael Douglas character ever logged into QuickBooks to send out invoices.
He's so
He's
great,
he's always making like, restaurant deals with a handshake.
right? And he's
Yeah,
always but he's always confident about his choices, no matter what they are.
Sending invoices.
So good.
That just made me laugh. Yeah, okay.
What autistic social media account should people be paying attention to?
Everything Becca, Lori, Hector.
Thank you.
I'm not even
Amen.
kidding. Like, it's just spot on relatable every time.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
What's the one thing in your routine you couldn't possibly live without?
My morning routine, which is, and I say this because when I skip it, by the end of the day, when I skip my morning routine, I'm like in a dumpster with garbage all over me. Things don't go well. And that really is waking up on my timeline, which sometimes is slower, sometimes is quick. But then breakfast, 2 eggs and toast, and sometimes bacon if I have extra time that morning, and orange juice. And then I go upstairs and I'm in the bathroom for 2 hours, and we'll leave it at that. And then come out and I'm ready to start my day. But when I do that, I can like invent ways to colonize Mars. When I don't do that, like I said, I turn into a hobo. Like I can't think straight, and it's nutty.
Dog, cat, or must I choose?
From the hip at this point, I'm a convert. I would have been cat my whole life. I'm dog now. Like, I love cats, but if I had to choose, I could, and I would go with a dog at this point.
Nice.
Our dog has won me over.
Took me a dog to run me over too. I was not a both person for a very long time.
Were you cats?
I was cats only,
'Cause
strictly cats. I mean, like obsessively cats, because I just think dogs are really stupid. Like they do whatever you ask them, no matter what. They don't question it. They don't have an opinion about it. They're just as excited if we're going to the vet or hiking or right. And so for me, as a really logical person, I was like, wow, they're really dumb. Like they really they don't get it, right? And cats are all about opinions. Cats do their own thing. Cats are like, your opinion sucks. Cats are like,
Yeah.
and so I just always vibed them,
A
But
cat will
I
punch
get
you in
it
the
now.
face as you're handing the cat a treat. She'll punch your hand. It's
Right.
like, fuck you. Like I'm trying to help you.
Well, I didn't want it right now, is what they do. And they're like, so I always vibed it that way. Like I want it when I want it, not right now.
I used to eat. So first of all, cats are, I don't want to paint you with a brush, but it sounds to me like cats are New York Becca, dogs are Denver Becca.
Absolutely. Do you know that actually happened, you guys? There is actually some bias in Colorado against cats. People are really so pro dog here that they are just like, ew, you like cats? They like
We're
doing
an anti-cat
really?
state.
What? I go with you anywhere. What is that?
Well, your cats are awesome. They're always just hanging out doing what they do, sunbathing on the top of a shed.
Right? I mean, I don't know. I just give my cats the life. What can I tell you?
I used to eat so much dry cat food. And my mom caught me once when I was younger. This wasn't like a couple of years
Last
ago.
week.
Yeah. Thanksgiving, I'm sitting there with Meow Mix, like past the fancy feast. But I used to eat it just hand over fist. And then my mom, I don't know if she was accurate about this or she was just realizing I was wasting the family's money by eating cat food. But she told me, she's like, you don't eat that. You're going to get worms or some kind of parasite. And then I stopped, but I could have lived on dry cat food. Anyway, we'll cover that in the next episode.
Right.
We'll get there.
That wasn't the question.
One last question in this episode. What does autistic joy mean to you?
The freedom, the personal freedom and the zen that comes with when you don't have to put up any fronts and you're doing your thing. To me, that's the joy. Is neurotypicals would refer to it as dance like no one's watching.
That's you too.
So I feel like when I'm in a zone, I feel like people practice yoga, meditation, thought work their whole lives to get that Zen state. And I feel like I can drop right into it if I'm just left alone. So autistic joy, I think, is just it's just like total freedom. And if I had an island,
Right?
perfect. Yeah. How'd I do?
You did so good. We had so much fun. Before we hang up, I do want to just give you a chance to plug the 2 podcasts before we hang up, because you guys are going to love what's coming out from Dave. I'm excited. So go ahead, tell them about the podcast before we hang up. And I forget.
Thank you. Yeah, the 2 podcasts that I said yes to for free. The 2 next projects I'm not getting paid on are, no, I'm totally kidding. So Uniquely Human, the podcast, is a podcast essentially inspired by the book Uniquely Human by Dr. Barry Prezant. And you can go to uniquelyhuman.com, or you can subscribe on iHeartRadio, Spotify, all the different platforms, Apple and that stuff. But that's a bi-weekly deep dive into giving autistic people a voice and letting autism and neurodiversity shine, but also having real, sometimes tricky conversations. For instance, a couple episodes ago, we were talking about systemic racism and how, a lot of us don't realize, for as tricky as it is getting a diagnosis for any family, multiply that by a factor of 10 or 20 for families of color. And it's crazy. So that's the one podcast. And then I'm starting my own because creatively there's stuff I want to be able to say and do that wouldn't be appropriate in other people's podcasts. So I'm launching my own January 3rd, which is the 8-year anniversary of publishing my book. So wait, January 3rd, 2021 to 12. Yeah, 9-year anniversary of publishing my book. So it'll be a lot of conversations with me and my wife, Kristen, and talking about how we sort of make not how we make our marriage work, but we just talk about like what's interesting to us about our relationship, what's interesting to us about how people perceive the relationship, and then other things just like trying to convince her to let me cut her hair because I know I could do it really well. But but I've been watching and studying YouTube videos on cutting hair for weeks, and because we're in COVID, right? So and I insist that her hair has to be wet, and to cut it so it's all straight, you have to cut different lengths,
Right.
and then it averages out to straight. But she just keeps saying like, no, just take a pair of fucking scissors and cut my hair. Like, just do it already, get it over with. It's like, no. I need to buy you a cape, and I need one of those pump chairs that lifts you up and down.
I really need to be in it. Is what I need to.
Totally. So that's coming out January 3rd. So 2 podcasts. That one's called Dave Conversations with an Idiot. And there'll be a whole, if I was better at self-promoting, there'd be a whole publicity push behind it. But let's face it, I'm just going to put it up there. And if people
Just
listen,
do it. Just do it.
Totally.
Don't miss it, you guys. I'm looking forward to it because I love his wife, Kristen. I'm a fangirl of his wife, Kristen. I love her coaching style. I love what she does. I love her podcast. I think it's great. So I think if you have the time, it'd be a really interesting thing for you guys to listen to their conversations because they are a neurodiverse couple. Right. And so that's something people are always struggling with. So if you're part of a neurodiverse couple, you might just feel like you're not alone anymore. Right.
Imagine. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, that's we got to get you on.
I would love to come. I love you guys so much. So thank you for coming so much. Thank you, Doug, for your amazing questions because they are the best. I love them so much. And yeah, that's it for us. We had a really good talk. So I hope we'll catch you guys next time on the next one that we do, next info dump. But for now, Dave Finch.
Thank you, everybody. Guys, that was so much fun. That was great.